The airport was a beast, a roaring maze of hurried footsteps, blaring announcements, and the sharp tang of overpriced coffee. At 72, John Jack Callahan moved through it with the steady gait of a man who'd faced worse chaos than a crowded terminal at Chicago O'Hare. His weathered leather jacket hung loose over a plain gray t-shirt, and a faded Navy veteran ball cap sat low on his brow, shielding eyes that had seen too much to be rattled by a delayed flight. His left hip ached, a souvenir from a grenade blast in Fallujah that had left scars both visible and not. Still, his spine stayed ramrod straight, a habit forged in 28 years of service, from the deserts of Iraq to the jungles of Vietnam's tail end. Today he was headed to Annapolis, Maryland, to watch his grandson Ethan graduate from the Naval Academy, a third-generation Callahan in dress blues. The thought brought a flicker of pride, warmer than any metal tucked away in his attic. Jack's weathered hands clutched a digital boarding pass and a loyalty card he'd earned through years of Navy veteran benefits with American Skyways. He rarely used the points. Frugality was a habit as old as his scars, but today felt special. A quiet corner, a decent cup of coffee, maybe a chance to crack open the biography of Admiral Nimitz he'd been carrying. The airline's Admirals Club, their fancy VIP lounge, promised just that. He approached the glass doors, the sleek logo glinting under fluorescent lights. Inside he could see plush armchairs and the soft glow of privilege, a world apart from the terminal's plastic chaos. "Good morning," Jack said, his voice gravelly but warm, offering a nod to the young woman at the reception desk. Her name tag read Caitlin, and her eyes flicked over his jacket, lingered on his cap, and narrowed with a judgment she didn't bother to hide. "Loyalty card?" she asked, her tone sharp, like she was already sure he didn't belong. Jack held up his phone, the digital pass glowing. "Should be good to go." She scanned it with a sigh, her manicured nails tapping impatiently. The system chirped, confirming his access. Caitlin's eyebrows shot up, but her lips stayed tight. "Fine," she said, waving him through like she was doing him a favor. "You can go in." As Jack passed, he caught her muttering to a coworker, a guy in a crisp vest who smirked. "Probably swiped his son's account or something." A snicker followed. Jack's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. He'd learned long ago which fights were worth picking, and this wasn't one. Not yet. The Admirals Club was everything the terminal wasn't. Soft jazz humming through hidden speakers, leather seats that didn't pinch your back, and a hush that swallowed the outside world. Jack found a quiet corner near a window, the Chicago skyline smudged with morning haze. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and unwrapped a turkey sandwich he'd packed from home. Airport prices were a racket, and he wasn't about to pay $15, 0 cents, for a stale croissant. Settling in, he opened his book, the pages worn from years of rereading. For a blissful 25 minutes, it was just him, Nimitz's specific campaigns, and the bitter warmth of coffee done right. Then the air shifted. A loud group stormed in, led by a man in his late 40s, his tailored suit screaming money and his voice dripping with entitlement. "This is ridiculous," he barked, loud enough to turn heads. "I was guaranteed the elite section, not this cattle pen." The man's name, Jack overheard, was Preston Caldwell, some hedge fund hotshot who tossed around terms like private equity and portfolio diversification as if they were weapons. The lounge manager, a slick type named Derek with gelled hair and a fake smile, materialized instantly. "Mr. Caldwell, sir, my deepest apologies. We'll get this sorted right away." Caldwell's eyes swept the lounge, landing on Jack's corner, the only spot with empty seats nearby. Derek followed his gaze, his smile tightening into something predatory. He strode over, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "This area is reserved for our platinum tier members. You'll need to move." Jack looked up. Calm but steady, he held up his phone, the digital pass still open. "My access covers the whole lounge, son. Checked it myself." Derek's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Jack's cap, his expression souring like he'd bitten a lemon. "There's been a mix-up," he said, his tone clipped. "This lounge is for VIPs, real VIPs, not folks like you." He snapped his fingers, and a security guard, all muscle and no expression, appeared like he'd been waiting for the cue. The room went quiet. Other patrons glanced over, some curious, some embarrassed, but none spoke up. Jack's coffee sat on the table, steam still curling from the cup. He could have argued, could have raised hell about his service, his medals, his right to be there, but men like Jack didn't need to shout their worth. He closed his book, grabbed his cane, a sturdy oak one he'd carved himself, and stood slowly, his hip protesting. "All right," he said, his voice low but clear. "I'll go." He left the coffee behind, half drunk, still warm. Outside the terminal was a different world. Hard plastic chairs dug into his back, the kind designed to keep you moving, not resting. Jack shifted, trying to ease the ache in his hip. His brace, hidden under his jacket, helped, but not enough. Around him the airport churned, kids whining, travelers sprinting, announcements droning about gate changes. Through the lounge's frosted glass, he could see Caldwell and his posse sprawling across his former corner, barking orders for champagne and artisanal charcuterie. A server scurried to keep up, nearly dropping a tray in her haste to please the man who acted like he owned the place. Jack opened his book again, but the words blurred. It wasn't the insult that stung. It was the timing. Today was about Ethan, about legacy, about pride. To be shooed out like a stray dog for a guy whose only battle was with his stockbroker, that cut deeper than shrapnel. He adjusted his cap, the Navy emblem, faded but proud, and tried to focus. Some battles you let go, some you didn't. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "Sir?" A young lounge attendant, maybe 20, stood before him, her badge reading Emma. She glanced back nervously, like she was breaking some unspoken rule. "I saw what happened in there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't right. You had a valid pass." Jack offered a small smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Appreciate that, Emma. But I've been kicked out of worse places. At least this one's got clean floors." She didn't smile back. They do this sometimes, move people for the big spenders. But kicking out a veteran? That's new and wrong. Inside, Caldwell was laughing, his voice booming as Derek hovered, nodding like a trained dog. Emma fidgeted with her badge. "I should get back before they notice I'm gone." Jack nodded. "Go on, kid. Don't get yourself in trouble." She hesitated, then added, "I'm Emma, by the way. I wanted you to know I see you." Jack's throat tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Kindness doesn't go unnoticed, Emma, even when it's quiet." She slipped back through the glass doors, and Jack returned to his book, though his mind was elsewhere. The terminal's noise pressed in, but he sat tall, his cap a silent badge of a life spent serving. Inside the lounge, Caldwell raised a glass, toasting his own importance, while Derek laughed along, their eyes flicking toward the glass doors with smirks that said they'd already forgotten the old man they'd dismissed. They didn't notice the storm brewing outside, because men like Jack Callahan didn't need to shout to be heard, not when their story was just beginning. The terminal's clamor pressed against Jack Callahan like a living thing, a relentless tide of voices, footsteps, and the tinny drone of departure announcements. He sat in the unforgiving plastic chair, his navy cap low, his cane resting against his knee. The ache in his hip pulsed with every shift, but it was the sting of being cast out that burned deeper. A wound no brace could ease. Inside the Admiral's Club, through the frosted glass, Jack could see Preston Caldwell holding court, his laughter sharp and careless, while the lounge manager Derek orbited him like a satellite, eager to please. The half-finished coffee Jack had left behind was lightly cold now, a small casualty in a world that seemed to value wallets over worth. He opened his book again, trying to lose himself in Nimitz's strategies. But the words swam. His mind drifted to Ethan, his grandson, who'd be standing tall tomorrow in Annapolis, the latest Callahan to carry the family's Navy legacy. Jack had survived ambushes, firefights, and nights when the stars over Fallujah seemed to pulse with danger. Yet here, in the sterile hum of an airport, he felt exposed, diminished by a system that measured a man by his suit, not his scars. He adjusted his cap, the faded Navy emblem a quiet defiance, and told himself to let it go. Some fights weren't worth the breath. Then a shadow fell across him, sharp and purposeful. Jack looked up, his eyes meeting the crisp lines of a Navy dress uniform, the silver stars on the shoulders catching the terminal's harsh light. Rear Admiral Marcus Kane stood there, his face weathered but unyielding, a man whose presence could silence a room. Behind him, two junior officers and a civilian aide stood at attention, their eyes scanning the crowd like hawks. Kane's gaze locked on Jack, recognition flickering, then hardening into something fiercer. "Chief Petty Officer Callahan?" Kane's voice was low, but it carried the weight of command. Jack started to rise, his hip protesting, but Kane waved him down. "At ease, Jack. What the hell are you doing out here in this plastic purgatory?" Jack managed a half smile, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Just catching my breath, Admiral. Had a little misunderstanding in the lounge." Kane's brow furrowed, his eyes flicking to the glass doors where Colwell's laughter echoed faintly. "Misunderstanding? Your pass is valid, isn't it?" Jack nodded, holding up his phone. "Scanned clean. Full access." Kane's jaw tightened, his gaze turning to ice. "Wait here, Chief." He turned on his heel, his entourage falling in step as he strode toward the lounge entrance. The receptionist, Caitlin, froze at the sight of the Admiral, her bored expression collapsing into panic. "Sir, welcome to—" she stammered, but Kane cut her off. "Get me your manager, now." Caitlin scrambled inside, and moments later Derek appeared, his slick smile faltering as he registered the uniform and the steel in Kane's eyes. "Admiral, what an honor," Derek began, his voice oily. "How can we assist you?" Kane didn't blink. "You can start by explaining why Chief Petty Officer John Callahan, a man who pulled my sorry ass out of a kill zone in Fallujah, is sitting on a plastic chair outside your lounge with a valid pass." Derek's smile twitched, his eyes darting nervously. "There was a mix-up, sir. We needed to prioritize our elite-tier guests. It's policy." "Policy?" Kane's voice was a blade slicing through the room's hum. "You kicked out a man with 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for some Wall Street cowboy with a loud mouth? Show me the footage. Now." Derek hesitated, then nodded to Caitlin, who fumbled with a tablet. Kane's aide, a sharp-eyed lieutenant named Rivera, was already on the phone, pulling strings to access the airport's CCTV. 10 minutes later, they were in a cramped security office, the air thick with tension. The chief of security, a grizzled ex-Marine named Torres, had fast-tracked the request, his own jaw tight as he queued up the footage. The screen showed Jack presenting his pass, Caitlin's smirk, Derek's smug dismissal, and the moment he'd called Jack riffraff while gesturing to Caldwell's entourage. The audio crackled through. "Gotta clear out the dead weight. These old vets think a cap makes them somebody." The room went still, the words hanging like smoke after a blast. Even Torres, who had seen plenty, looked like he'd been punched. Kane's face was stone, but his eyes burned. He pulled out his phone, his voice low and lethal. "This is Rear Admiral Marcus Kane. I need Richard Bennett, CEO of American Skyways, on the line, immediately." Derek paled, his hands twitching. "Admiral, sir, I'm sure we can resolve this quietly." Kane silenced him with a look. "You lost that chance when you disrespected a man who's worth 10 of you." Minutes later, Kane was speaking to Bennett, his tone clipped, precise, like he was calling in coordinates for an airstrike. "Mr. Bennett, your staff just humiliated a man who saved 43 sailors, including me when our convoy was pinned down in 2004. Chief Callahan didn't just serve. He bled for this country, and your manager tossed him out like trash to make room for a guy who thinks money buys honor." Kane paused, listening, then nodded. "Good. I'll expect you here." He hung up, his eyes never leaving Derek, who looked like he might bolt. 15 minutes later, a sleek airport golf cart screeched to a stop outside the security office. Richard Bennett, CEO of American Skyways, stepped off, his tailored suit at odds with the fury in his eyes. He shook Kane's hand, then turned to Torres. "Show me." The footage played again, each frame tightening Bennett's expression. When it ended, he turned to Derek, his voice cold as a Chicago winter. "You're done. So is anyone who stood by and let this happen. Get your things and get out." Caitlin, standing nearby, gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. 2 other staff members who'd been hovering froze, their faces ashen. Bennett didn't stop there. He turned to Preston Caldwell, who'd wandered into the office, sensing trouble. "Mr. Caldwell, your business is appreciated, but not at the cost of our soul. Chief Callahan's service to this nation outweighs every dollar you've ever spent with us. You'll find another lounge." Caldwell opened his mouth, then shut it, his confidence crumbling under Bennett's stare. He muttered something about a meeting and slunk out, his entourage trailing like scolded dogs. Outside, Kane returned to Jack, who hadn't moved, his book still open but unread. "Chief," Kane said, his voice softer now, "I owe you more than an apology. Come with me." Jack shook his head, his pride warring with his fatigue. "I'm fine here, Admiral, just waiting for my flight." Kane leaned in, his voice firm but warm. "You're not waiting out here like some nobody. You're a damn hero, Jack. Let me make this right." Inside the lounge, the air had shifted. The staff who remained moved like they were walking on glass. Bennett approached Jack, his hand extended, his face etched with shame. "Chief Callahan, I'm Richard Bennett. What happened here was a disgrace. I can't undo it, but I can promise you it'll never happen again." Jack shook his hand, his grip steadied despite the years. "Appreciate it," he said simply, his voice hiding the weight of the moment. Bennett didn't stop at words. By the next morning, a plaque was being installed in the Admiral's Club, engraved with Jack's name and a line, "For those who serve, this seat is always yours." The airline rolled out mandatory training across its network, starting with the footage of Jack's ejection, followed by a recounting of his service missions declassified just enough to make the point. Every Veterans Day, every Admiral's Club would set aside a table. One black coffee, one empty chair, one Navy cap. A silent tribute to Jack and every sailor, soldier, and Marine who'd given more than money could buy. Back in the lounge, Jack sat with Kane, the two men sharing a quiet coffee. No words were needed, just the understanding of men who'd seen the same wars, carried the same weight. Outside, Emma, the young attendant who'd spoken up, slipped her phone into her pocket. She'd recorded Bennett's arrival, the firings, the moment Jack was welcomed back. That night, she posted it with a caption, "He fought for us. Today we fought for him." By dawn, the video was everywhere, shared by veterans, families, strangers who saw Jack's face and felt their hearts break for a man who'd given everything only to be told he wasn't enough. Jack didn't know about the video yet. He didn't need to. As he sipped his coffee, his eyes drifted to the window, where planes cut through the morning sky. He thought of Ethan, of the boy who'd grown into a man worthy of the uniform, and for the first time that day, Jack felt the weight lift, just a little, because some battles, the ones that mattered, were won not with shouts, but with the quiet dignity of those who stood up when it counted. The Chicago O'Hare terminal buzzed with its relentless rhythm, a cacophony of rolling suitcases, hurried goodbyes, and the occasional wail of a tired toddler. Jack Callahan sat in the Admiral's Club, his Navy cap resting on the table beside a fresh cup of black coffee, courtesy of Rear Admiral Marcus Kane. The lounge was quieter now, the air heavy with the aftermath of Richard Bennett's swift justice. The fired staff were gone, their absence a silent reprimand, and Preston Caldwell's entourage had slunk away, their champagne glasses abandoned. Jack's eyes lingered on the window, where planes carved paths through the dawn sky. He thought of Ethan, his grandson, standing tall at Annapolis tomorrow, the weight of the Callahan legacy on his young shoulders. Jack's heart ached, not from his old wounds, but from the quiet pride of knowing the boy would carry it well. Across the lounge, Emma, the young attendant who dared to speak up, slipped her phone back into her pocket. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she'd done. While Bennett had torn through the staff like a storm, Emma had quietly recorded the scene. The Admiral's fury, Derek's stunned silence, the CEO's unwavering verdict. She'd captured Jack's return, too, his weathered face steady as he shook Bennett's hand, refusing to let the moment break him. Emma's video wasn't just a record. It was a spark. That night after her shift, she uploaded it to X with a caption that cut like a knife. "He fought for our freedom. They fought to take his seat. Today, justice won." She didn't expect it to go anywhere. She just needed the world to see what she had. By morning, the video was a wildfire. It spread across X, shared by veterans groups, military families, and strangers who saw Jack's face and felt their chests tighten. Hashtags like Honor Chief Callahan and Respect Our Vets trended by noon, each post a cry of outrage and admiration. Commenters recounted their own stories, fathers, uncles, sisters dismissed or disrespected for their service. A Marine from Texas wrote, "This is my dad every time he travels enough." A teacher from Ohio shared, "I showed this to my class. We cried for Chief Callahan." The video racked up millions of views, each one a testament to a truth too often ignored. Heroes don't always wear capes, sometimes just a faded cap. Jack, oblivious to the digital storm, boarded his flight to Annapolis. He settled into his seat, his cane tucked beside him, and opened his Nimitz biography. The passenger next to him, a young woman in a business suit, glanced at his cap and offered a small nod. "Thank you for your service," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Jack tipped his head, his usual response ready, but something in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't pity, it was respect, raw and unpolished. "Just doing my job," he murmured, but the words felt heavier today. In Annapolis, Ethan Callahan stood at the gate, his dress blues immaculate, his posture a mirror of his grandfather's. At 23, he was the spitting image of Jack's late son, lost to a roadside bomb in Basra. Ethan's eyes lit up when he saw Jack, his smile wide but tinged with something deeper. "Grandpa," he said, taking Jack's bag with a gentleness that belied his strength. "You all over the internet." Jack raised an eyebrow, his mouth twitching. "News travels faster than I do these days." Ethan hesitated, then added, "They're calling you a hero again. That video, it's everywhere." Jack shook his head, his voice gruff but kind. "Don't call me a hero, Ethan. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home, and the ones who stood up back there. Kane, Bennett, that girl Emma, they're the ones who deserve the salute." Ethan's eyes glistened, but he nodded, pride and pain mixing in his gaze. As they walked through the terminal, travelers paused, their glances lingering on Jack's cap. A veteran in a wheelchair offered a crisp salute, his hand trembling but sure. A young couple whispered, pointing discreetly, their faces awed. Jack didn't notice, or pretended not to. He was focused on Ethan, on the boy who'd become a man worthy of the uniform. Back in Chicago, the Admirals Club was undergoing a quiet transformation. By the next day, a polished brass plaque gleamed on the wall where Jack had been ejected, in honor of Chief Petty Officer John Callahan, whose service reminds us that true value lies in sacrifice, not status. Bennett's orders were clear. Every lounge in the American Skyways network would adopt new training, starting with Jack's story. Employees watched the footage, their faces pale as Derek's words echoed. "These old vets think a cat makes them somebody." The lesson was unmistakable. Respect wasn't optional, not for those who'd earned it with blood and years. On Veterans Day, every Admirals Club set aside a table, one black coffee, one empty chair, one Navy cap. It wasn't just for Jack, but for every service member who'd ever been overlooked, their sacrifices reduced to a faded emblem on a hat. Veterans visiting the lounges paused at these tables, some leaving handwritten notes, others just nodding in silent kinship. The gesture spread beyond the airline. Coffee shops, diners, even small-town VFW halls began their own tributes, a quiet rebellion against a world that too often forgot. Jack, now in Annapolis, stood beside Ethan at the Naval Academy's graduation. The sea of white uniforms stretched before them, young officers ready to serve. Ethan's name was called, and as he crossed the stage, Jack's chest tightened, not with pain, but with a pride so fierce it stole his breath. He clapped, his weathered hands steady, and for a moment he saw his son in Ethan's stride, his own younger self in the boy's squared shoulders. The crowd cheered, but Jack's eyes were on the sky, where clouds parted just enough to let a ray of sun break through. Back home in Indiana, a letter arrived weeks later, sealed with the American Skyways logo. Inside was a lifetime platinum membership to the Admirals Club and a handwritten note from Bennett. "Chief Callahan, your story has changed us. This is just the start." Tucked in the envelope was a photo of the plaque, its words etched in brass. A promise kept. Jack set the letter aside, his fingers tracing the edges of his cap. He didn't need the membership. He rarely traveled anymore. But the photo that he kept, tucking it into the frame of his son's old service portrait. The video, meanwhile, refused to fade. It lived on X, shared and reshared, a rallying cry for those who believed respect was earned, not bought. Posts began appearing from veterans who'd visited the Admiral's Club, sharing photos of the empty chair, the coffee, the cap. "This is for Chief Callahan," one read, "and for all of us who've been told we don't belong." The story reached news outlets, talk shows, even a congressional hearing on veterans' treatment, but Jack stayed out of it, content to let the world spin without him. Yet the story wasn't done. A month later, Emma, now promoted to lounge supervisor, received an anonymous tip about a passenger in the Chicago lounge, a man in a flashy suit demanding special treatment, his voice eerily familiar. She checked his name, Preston Caldwell. He was back, acting as if nothing had changed, as if Jack's humiliation had never happened. Emma's hands shook as she pulled up the lounge's new protocol, her finger hovering over the security button. She glanced at the plaque, at Jack's name, and made a choice. The call went out, and within minutes, security was at the door, their faces hard. Caldwell's protests echoed through the lounge, but this time no one bent. Somewhere in Annapolis, Ethan sat with his grandfather, sharing a beer on a quiet porch. "They're still talking about you," Ethan said, scrolling through X on his phone. Jack shrugged, his eyes on the horizon. "Let 'em talk, as long as they remember what matters." Ethan nodded, but his voice caught as he added, "They will, Grandpa, because of you." Jack didn't reply, but his hand rested on Ethan's shoulder, a silent promise that some fights, even the quiet ones, left echoes that never faded. And in the Chicago lounge, as Caldwell was escorted out, Emma placed a fresh coffee on the empty table, the navy cap beside it. She stepped back, her eyes wet, and whispered, "For you, Chief." Outside, the terminal roared on, but inside, the silence held a weight. A story unfinished, a fight not yet won, a hero whose name would outlast them all.